Hi everyone, it's Brittany of BZ Art, and today I'm going to show you how to make my bunny pattern. This pattern is available from my website or from my Etsy, and it's kind of an advanced pattern. I definitely don't recommend it for a beginner, and even for an intermediate sewer, this is a tricky one. So here's an example of the finished plush. This one, I haven't done the feet yet, but there's needle sculpting on the feet and the paws. There is whiskers. There's lots of darts on the head. You use a gather here for the tail. This technique of sewing the foot on can be a bit tricky. So just in general, there's a lot of little techniques here, and it can kind of trip you up if you don't really know what you're doing. So definitely save this project until you're feeling more comfortable with your sewing skills. So to get started here, I'm going to work on one of the front feet. So for the front feet pieces, I usually trace these and then just cut a big square around them because it's easier, it saves time. Pattern does include a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, except in the holes on the belly and the back feet, and those are an 1/8 of an inch. And again, as a reminder, as in all my videos, I have 3 birds in the craft room, and they are pretty active right now, so you might hear them moving about and talking a bit. So please forgive me for their noise. So you're going to start sewing your front foot, the top corner here. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim all this excess seam allowance. And using my hemostats, I'm going to turn this foot right side out. Now you're going to want to stuff the foot. Again, I'm just using my hemostats for this. You're going to want to stuff the foot very firmly on the paw end and not so much at the opening, because at the opening you're going to be sewing it into a seam, and if that's too bulky it will make it very difficult. Okay, so once you've got that stuffed, you're going to take a disappearing ink pen and mark where the toes are going to go. Now you take a needle and thread with lots of thread. You definitely don't want to be too short on this. Insert the needle through the stuffing and come out at the bottom of one of the toes. Now wrap the thread around and come in at the bottom of the toe from the back side, directly out to the front. And pull tight. I'm going to go around again. I'm using my index finger here to hold the thread in place so it doesn't unravel, and I'm going to tie a knot. I'm just going to double knot that because I don't feel like that felt very secure. Alright, so then you come in at the knot at the bottom of the toe and come out at the bottom of the other toe on the front side. And repeat the same process where you wrap it around. Alright, so once you finish that step, you're going to repeat the process with the other front foot. I've already done this, so you have 2 matching feet. Next, I'm going to switch and work on the tail. The tail is this big circle piece. And how we're going to do this is you want to set your sewing machine so it has the longest stitch length possible. Alternatively, you can do this with hand sewing. We're just going to make a loose basting stitch all the way around it. Now when this happens, don't tie off at the end or cut or anything like that. You're going to want to just lift your needle and your foot and pull it out. And then cut. Now you want to take one side of the thread, whichever one pulls the easiest, and pull together. Alright, so once that's all nice and gathered, you're going to take the other thread that you didn't pull and just tie these in a knot together so that it doesn't come unraveled. I am struggling with this because I'm having a hard time seeing. I'm sorry. Just assume that I just tied a very wonderful, perfect knot on the first try. Let's just pretend that together. Alright, I'm just going to clip off this extra thread. There's that warning about the birds. And then you're going to take a little puff of stuffing and stuff it into the tail. Alright, so now you have a little poofy tail. You can sew this closed if you'd like, but you will sew it onto the body later, so it doesn't really matter if it's open. Alright, now I'm going to stitch again and go do the front back feet, if that makes sense, the bottom feet of the bunny. So on my pattern, you'll notice that there are instructions to cut out 4 of these. 2, 1 normal and 1 reverse with a circle, and 1 normal and 1 reverse without. The ones with the circle are going to make up the front of the bunny's body, and they'll match up with the corresponding foot pieces that have similar instructions to do circles on too. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay this front piece, the right side facing up, and place the foot piece over it so that the holes line up, the right side facing down. And then you're going to sew around this opening. Oops, I forgot to change my sewing machine. Don't forget that. Okay, back on track. Alright, and now I'm just going to clip some of this excess seam allowance inside this circle to allow it to turn more easily and reduce this bulk here. Again, the seam on the inside of these circles is 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's smaller, and that is just to allow you to actually see the circle. If it was 1/4 of an inch, there would just be a very small opening and a very big seam allowance. So now that I've kind of trimmed some of that away, what you're going to do is take the body and push it out through the opening. so that now they have the wrong sides together. And you're just going to kind of want to get this as flat as you can. If you're having problems, you can try and clip the seam allowance. Alright, and then we're going to lay the foot piece without a hole over top of it, like that, and pin it in place. Alright, and now we're just going to sew around it, and be careful to keep this body piece out of the way. Right, then go ahead and trim the excess seam allowance on this foot. And then you can turn it right side out. As you can see, now we've got a nice foot that will be on the front of the body without having to do that with hand sewing. It makes the attachment nice and neat and makes sure the feet are nice and even. If you are struggling with this technique, you can always cut out 2 foot pieces without a hole and sew them together. Make a small cut on the back side, turn them right side out, stuff them, and then ladder stitch them to the front of the body once the body is stuffed. But I prefer this technique, and I definitely encourage you to challenge yourself and try this because it will make your life a lot easier and make your plushie look a lot more professional. So now that we've finished both feet, you're going to want to take this body and lay them on top of each other. And then we're going to sew them together, starting on this right side here. The curve that's less extreme. This is marked on the pattern as the with the points here and here. So just keep that in mind. If you sew on the side that has the more extreme curve, that's going to be the hip, and you're going to have to pull that out with a seam ripper, which no one really wants to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew that now. Alright, so that gives us the front of the bunny, and now we're going to do the back of the bunny, which is just 2 of the pieces without the holes. Again, we're going to put them together and sew along this less extreme curve here in the front. Actually, I think I finished that seam a bit early, so I'm just going to make sure that it's closed. And again, I'm trimming the excess seam allowance. The next step is to lay the back of the body up with the front of the body, the right sides together. And then starting at the bottom of the marked area for the arm, we're going to sew around. Make sure not to sew the feet up in the seam. center and the bottom of the mark for the arm on this side. Actually, I had some skipped stitches down here, so I'm going to go back over those. Alright, so now that we're done sewing that, I'm going to again trim the excess seam allowance along the bottom of the bunny. Now in the areas marked for the front arms, you're going to want to take them and put them so that the curve is facing up into these slots in the seam and sew them up. The reason why I saved this for now is because when you start sewing with them in the seam, it makes it a little bit harder to sew the rest of it because they kind of get in the way. So I just saved this for a little while later. That one looks good. I'm going to repeat this process for the next one. If you're having a hard time fitting it in, you can kind of either pull this other arm out or push it in further, whichever works out best for you. It is kind of a tight space, so just go slowly and be careful. And again, if you're having problems with any of this, you can pin it to keep it from sliding around. I don't, just because I have a lot of practice and my sewing machine has a built-in walking foot, but it's going to depend on your individual preferences and comfort level. So definitely don't forget the pins if that is something that you think will help. Alright, so we're going to turn this body of the bunny right side out. Ta-da! The next step is to stuff the body. This is where my hemostats definitely come in handy. You want to start with stuffing these feet through the holes in the body. Go ahead and attach the tail. So I'm going to take the tail and stick it right on the bottom here so that it's kind of lined up at the furthest out point. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense. Put it another way, I put it right so that it just barely touches the ground when the bunny is sitting down. It just adds a bit more of support for the bunny, and it's all around a good position for it to be in. So I'm just going to stick it there and then ladder stitch it on. Right now our body's finished and we can go ahead and set this aside. Next I'm going to sew the ears. So you're just going to take two ear pieces and line them up with the right sides together. I do use a piece of colorful cotton on the inside of my ears. You can do that if you wish. The pattern doesn't specifically call for it, but I think it's pretty cute. I'm going to turn the ear right side out. And repeat the process for your other ear. Now we're going to move to the back side of the head. The back side of this head has a lot of little darts. I actually don't even bother trying to cut into these. I'll just fold them in half right on the dart and then sew right on the line. And then I go ahead and trim that excess. So these darts might seem really little and insignificant, but each one helps to pull the head's shape just a little bit rounder. And they all work together to make the shape correct. So definitely don't skip them, even if they seem little and insignificant. They do help with the overall shape. Right, now that's done, you can see how each of these kind of works to pull the head into a round shape, rounder anyway. So now we're going to set this aside and switch to the front of the head. So you want to take the front of the head and your head gusset piece, and you're going to want to start lining it up on one side and sewing around. Now as you sew, you're going to want to move the head gusset to conform with the shape of the head. And I stop at the bottom of the nose there, the bottom point. And trim this excess seam allowance. And then switch to the other side. And this time I start at the bottom of the nose here. And sew around to the top. Again, I'm kind of moving and adjusting to make sure that the gusset and the head are aligning. And once more, trimming this excess seam allowance. Now we're going to take this and sew the gussets, or I'm sorry, the darts. For the head, we have 2 small cheek darts and 1 larger dart at the bottom. The bottom one, since it is larger, I actually do cut that and leave a seam allowance. Okay, so once we're done with both sides of the head, you're going to take the head and lay it with the right side facing up. This is the front piece, and align the ears in the spaces that are marked for the ears. With the ears, you're going to want to have the pattern fabric facing down if you're using it, and you're going to want to have the longer side at the top. And then you're just going to pin those in place. Even though I don't pin very often, I do pin the head just because this is kind of a tricky piece and there's a lot of potential for these ears to slide around while you're working. And then we're going to take and align the bottom piece. A good rule of thumb here is to start at the cheek darts because these will line up nicely together. You'll get the other dart about the middle of each ear, maybe a little further to the front, or top rather. Alright, and then I'm just going to kind of tuck the ears out of the way so we don't accidentally sew them up. This middle seam on the front should line up right in the middle of these 2 smaller seams. And then I'm going to sew all around, leaving about a 2-finger width space open at the bottom. I'm going to trim the excess seam allowance again. And now we're going to insert the safety eyes and nose. So the eyes on this plushie are 15mm safety eyes, and the nose is a 10mm nose. And the one I'm using is flocked with velvet, but that's definitely not necessary, just a personal preference. So you're going to want to go ahead and cut a little hole where the eyes are marked. And another one where the nose is marked right in the middle here. And then from the inside, you're going to insert the eye and poke it out through the holes. In this case, it's the nose, not the eye. And then you're going to latch the washer down over top of it. Right now I'm going to take a pair of wire cutters and I'm going to trim off the posts of these. This step is optional, but it's something that I like to do just to kind of keep things nice. Sometimes these posts can kind of push awkwardly into the stuffing and make the eyes look crooked or make them look like they stick out too far. With these shorter ones, like I just clipped here, it's probably not as big of a deal, but I still clip them anyway just because I'm in the habit of it. So now you're going to reach in the head and pull on the ears and use them to pull the head right side out. And from here we're going to move on to stuffing the plush in the head. So you're just going to take small pieces of stuffing and stuff them in and kind of work them into the shape. Stuffing is very important for the shape of this head. If you just lump a bunch of it in there, you're going to get kind of a lumpy ball and it's not going to look quite right. Looking at these ears, I think that I just told you the wrong directions. I am sorry. The longer part should be on the bottom. That's okay. That just makes this a different bunny. He'll have ears like this as opposed to ears like this. And that's just fine. I'm just spinning my nose because it ended up the wrong side facing up. Then you're going to want to take a little bit of stuffing and make sure that you stuff this nose area pretty firmly, that if you want it sticking out. Right, so now that we have that nice and stuffed, I'm going to go ahead and close it shut with a ladder stitch. the last step to finish off the head here is going to be to put the whiskers in. So for the whiskers, I'm using a wax-coated hand quilting thread. Any kind of thicker thread is going to look really nice here. Any kind of like nylon threads, maybe. I'm not 100% sure what's best for whiskers, but I tend to think that the thicker and sturdier the threads, the nicer it's going to look, because then they'll stick nice out. So you're going to want to double up on this thread, and then insert the two ends into your needle, and double over like this so you end up with 4 strands. And I'm going to take them and make a knot about 2 inches from the end. You're going to take this, insert it on one side of the nose, and push it out on the other side. And then you'll want to make another knot here. And pull that nice and tight. And then I just sort of pull them like this so I can make sure they're nice and even, and trim the ends off. And there you have some whiskers. The last step for your bunny is going to be to ladder stitch the head to the body. Right, and I actually forgot, we're not quite done. We still need to add the thread sculpting on the bottom toes here. So for that, we're just going to do it exactly like we did the top toes, only instead of inserting it through the opening, we're just going to go in from the back side. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle here. I'm going to make a knot at the bottom. Then I'm going to take my marker and draw where I want the toes to be. And come in from the back side and come out at the bottom of the right toe again. Go around, in and out, pull tight, round again to the back, and tie it off. In through the back, out through the bottom of the toe on the front, around, in, out, around, and another knot. And then you'll just repeat this process with this other foot. I'm not going to make you watch me do that. And you have a finished bunny. Obviously, with this bunny, I did the ears backwards, so it has some floppy ears. If you wanted, you could kind of ladder stitch these here and here to keep them off to the sides. If you wanted to do a bunny with a bent ear like this, I just fold it in half and ladder stitch along this fold here. And if you wanted to do a bunny whose paws are in like this, you just fold the paws down, and I just kind of pin them there, and then ladder stitch around where they touch the body to keep them down. So that is how you make a bunny. Hopefully that was a helpful tutorial for you to follow along with the pattern, and you will make lots of cute bunnies. Thanks for watching!